So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, we're joined by an awesome writer and director. It's the wonderful Jesse V. Johnson. Jesse, welcome to the show, sir.
Very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Brian.
And I'm really looking forward to chatting to you because not only is it because you're a Brit, but you're an awesome director and you've directed some amazing movies. I've got to say, Hell Hath No Fury is wonderful. I think it's a great movie. I'm sure we'll get onto that in a bit. But one of my first questions is, how on earth does someone from Winchester make it in Hollywood?
Well, I was born in Winchester. I didn't actually live there, but it's a good question. Regardless, it's been a long path getting here. I think you just have to sort of be very, very determined and a little bit of a sucker for punishment, glutton for humiliation, and sort of rather dogged and determined, or for want of a better word, you don't have a sort of nest egg or a source of financing where where film making and the business of getting films made and making your money becomes the only way you can survive. You become pretty efficient at it at some point. You learn the ropes. So
I mean, you started so young as well. So you went over to the States when you was in your early 20s, if I'm right in saying.
I don't think I was 20 yet. Yeah, but I it's a little while back. I've got grown up kids now, and they're finishing school and at college, and it's like it's very different. I feel when I left school, it would have been the sort of late 80s, and as long as you had a job, it's a very blue collar school. It was I think you got a letter to the headmaster explaining that you had a job that you were going to, and I think I was about 14 or 15. So, but it's not necessarily a rare thing. I know a lot of people who've done very well in this business have left formal education very early. It gives you a chance to learn the ropes, practically. And if you can keep your head down and you're prepared to work for not very much, and when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, you don't need to make an awful lot of money. You're happy being on set, you're being fed, and you're going from film to film. I don't think it's possible to do it that way anymore. I don't think there's the amount of filmmaking all in one place that there was when I think I was at the very tail end of a particularly golden era, certainly in the Los Angeles area, they just don't make films here like they did, in the 90s, when it was the absolute center of the world for TV, film, indie production studios. You'd go, when I was jobbing it as a PA, when I first arrived here, off the plane, so to speak, we would get the Thomas Guide and we'd get the Tuesday edition of the Hollywood Reporter that gave the addresses of films that were in development, and we'd simply zero it in on the map and we'd just hit every single one of them with 4 or 5 different resumes: art department PA, location PA, assistant director, office PA, and you just keep working. You do 2, 3, 4 productions a week, work like crazy. It was sometimes cash in hand and sometimes overlapping. Sometimes they vanished and you didn't get paid. It was an interesting time. It was really fun, but at the time it was frustrating a little bit, potentially not knowing what it was, how the trick was that I was going to become a director. But what I did know is that whilst I worked all of these different positions on the film set, I was working on a toolkit of my own, a toolbox, so to speak, that was becoming more and more honed, and I'd know what each different department did, and I could certainly hear if they were trying to blow wind up my skirt and kid me. So it was a good thing. I think it probably took a lot longer than film school to get where I wanted to be, but it was a wonderful process in of itself to work from one gig to another and get to watch sort of people work and see how they did it and really get a hands-on, to apprentice with, I was lucky enough to apprentice with an assistant directing team for 3 or 4 movies in a row: Mortal Kombat, Mr. Holland's Opus, Shawshank Redemption, The Birdcage. And they were always films with large numbers of extras, because this group that, this AD and his second that I had sort of hooked up with were particularly good and adept at handling big crowd scenes. They were very good with that. It was always imaginative and interesting in front of the camera, and then efficient and logistically well handled behind the camera, meaning, the extra turns up and you've got to get him on set as quickly as possible, which means getting him through wardrobe, getting his contract signed, getting makeup done, getting them approved by the various heads of the department, and then walked onto the actual set, and then obviously knowing where he's supposed to be and what he's doing. It's quite an involved job, and it has a foot in producing and a foot in directing, creativity and logistics. And for me, for my part, I think it's one of the most sort of key ways to learn about making independent movies is to start on set and be a PA, be a second, a crowd wrangler.
I think that's the same. I suppose you could put that thought into many jobs, that it's always good to start, I suppose, at the bottom, learn the industry, learn the trade, and climb the ladder. But I was quite shocked to learn that your uncle is the wonderful Vic Armstrong, which is a stunt double for Reeve and Harrison Ford, and he's a stunt coordinator. I mean, did he give you any advice or any help when you went over there on your adventure?
He's always been enormously helpful and full of advice, a fantastic sort of bedrock of information, someone to go to, as long as it doesn't involve money. Although I think over the years probably that too, but just a phenomenal sort of old school way of looking at things. He's extraordinarily good at what he does. But there's a few sort of elements of the coda of his character which I find enormously inspiring. He won't ever repeat himself. He won't ever take from his own show reel and use it again, even if it's worked beautifully. He always tries to think of a new way of doing something. And I think it's that ability to always stay fresh and not to cheat, so to speak, that has made him still a world-class second unit director in his 70s, still someone to aspire to, and you've still got to run to keep up with him, and the brain is so active and so fast, and watching him, I mean, it's awe-inspiring to watch someone at that level. I was very, very lucky just to be close enough to be able to watch how that worked. When I started with him, I was carrying his stunt bag on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and I was 14 at the time. I was still at school, but I was basically taking a lot of time off, and that was through the summer holidays at Elstree Studios doing the tank sequence, with the it was interior of a tank built on a gimbal, and just watching how the stunts were arranged, how he communicated with Spielberg, with very prickly characters like Sean Connery and and gentlemen like Denham Elliott, and then how he operated with Harrison, and managed to have everyone eating out of his hand and trusting him and having this amazing sort of respect for him is, to be able to watch that up close is the most amazing sort of wonderful film school that the postgraduate course in politics and diplomacy and very last on the list, literally production. It was a phenomenal advantage. I won't try and.
I mean, I have met the man in person a couple of times, and I just think he's such a humble gentleman, should I say? And he released a wonderful book that I've got, which is The Greatest Stuntman, which was his memoirs, which is an awesome read. So if anyone's listening or viewing now, Vic Armstrong, wonderful book. But overall, your career in the stunt world, have you got your favourite moment, your crowning moment that you're most proud of before we start talking about your awesome directing?
I think stunt-wise, for me, it was also about keeping people safe and making someone else look as fantastic as you could. You're taking young directors, and a lot of the time I was found myself in a position where I'm taking a young director with little experience and letting him know what can be done, how good his movie can be, and convincing him to not give up until we've really given it a shot to make his film as good as it can be, and that I could keep the cast and crew safe if we did it this way. So it was always quite, you take a lot of pride in that. I like that. I liked being able to make them start kids' careers, help them on their way, give them what they wanted. In terms of actual stunting, I'd given up stunts. I'd sort of handed my bag off, and I was directing indie movies like Charlie Valentine and The Butcher when the 2008 stock market crash kind of threw everything asunder. And I woke up one morning with 3 projects that had all fallen through, and very, very large bills that needed to be paid very quickly. So I had to ask for my stunt pads back from the person I'd lent them to, which was a humbling experience in and of itself. And I had to hang my shingle back out and go back to work as a stunt performer, which is, we should all be so lucky, Did that. It was, as I said, it was very humbling. But that period was working with Kenneth Branagh, P.T. Anderson, and Steven Spielberg. In very close proximity as it would work out, working very close to them, talking with them, watching how they directed, how they solved problems, how they went about their process. And it was the most wonderful experience, and it was fantastic. And looking back on it, I learned more from that than I did from the 15 years in the business prior to that. And it completely made me reevaluate everything. If you look at my directing resume, you have up to 2008, and the films are okay. They're low budget, action movies. They're fine. They did okay. They won some awards. And then you have post 2008, where I had the Scott Adkins run and these other pictures that became very, very popular and got me represented by Gersh, and basically turned my career around to the point where the phone is ringing as opposed to me picking up the phone and calling people to get work. So of those films, I would say probably creating the Battle of Stamford Ferry in Lincoln for Spielberg with Garrett Warren, the two of us putting that together. It was 2 weeks with 800 extras, creating vignettes, which we then sent through Adam Somner to Spielberg to look at these vignettes to choose which one we were going to use. We whittled it down from about 20 different vignettes, action fighting vignettes, to 6, which were the ones that were shot, and I think of those 4 ended up in the film. And it was compressed. It was pretty quick. It was a few weeks' work, but it was everything from casting these guys, and we had to cast them from all over the US because didn't want buff black guys with bald heads, which at the time in that particular period, the only stunt guys we could find that were African American were buff with shaved heads, which is how most stunt guys end up, because they have to cut their hair when you're doing something, and they work out a lot, so you get big. We literally had to find skinny African American stunt performers, which was really difficult. We had to go, to the 4 corners of the states: Pittsburgh, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, and these guys were all flown in. So it went from casting through to training each of them to fight with 1860s bayonet mounted on a musket, which I had to research ahead of time with specialists, and then I had to write down a book of how we taught these guys. And so, and then of course, working with Spielberg on the day, and Janusz Kaminski, and shooting the sequence with those wonderful, the crew he works with are the best in the world, the best at what they do. So it was a really exciting process. And I look back on that all the time and realize how wonderful, how lucky I was to have that, and that's found, all of these directors that I love, their tips and nuances and techniques have found their way into my work in some way or another, To answer your other question, what advice did Vic give? The real advice he gave that just popped into my head was, he said, never find yourself in a position where you're having to apologize to people on set too much, and if you do, then take it on the chin and apologize, but try to avoid putting yourself in that position. Don't say sorry too often. And this is pretty good advice. I would also say that being able to say sorry once in a while is a fantastic way of getting everyone's respect for you, but to do it too often is a big mistake. So that was his single most sort of memorable bit of advice that I remember.
I mean, you're mainly known, so going from stunt work into acting, the majority of the films that you direct and write are action movies. Was this something that you've always wanted to go into?
I love movies that touch me, that fill me with an emotion, that leave me thinking about the film 2 or 3 days later, a week later, a year later, making me want to revisit that film a year later. Whatever it takes to get that emotion is what I'm looking for in a movie. If there's no action scenes in it, it doesn't matter to me. However, I do think that the process of physical action, the commitment to it, the putting your life in jeopardy for something you believe in, is a part of the process of creating drama that does affect people and does stay with them. So that particular genre can be used and utilized in a way to really, really move people. It can also be crappy action films that are simply good action sequences that look like the stuntman's reel for 90 minutes, which I have no interest in at all. Action for action's sake doesn't move me. I get people saying, "Oh, you should see this film. There's some great fights in it." So I don't care. All I care about is if there's something that the actors have done, if the story is poignant enough that it's pulled you into it, then you care about the fight scene. Then you care about the car chase. I'll look at some techniques in films sometimes if a coordinator says this is something we could really utilize well in this one, it might work. That that would be of passing interest. But to watch action for action's sake, if it's a single take or it's a really, really cool fight scene that took the guys 8 months to rehearse, unless the story's of any interest to me, it doesn't, that's for babies, that's for toddlers to watch. The same mentality as watch this Tom and Jerry cartoons. It serves a purpose, it's fun, but it's not what I've chosen to do with my career. It's not why I came 5,000 miles to make movies, But early on in my career, I saw a film called For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is based on the Hemingway story with Gary Cooper and Ingrid Bergman. And I watched this film, and it's ostensibly a 1950s sort of action movie. And then somewhere in the third act, you realize you've been tricked. And it's the most amazingly moving film you've ever seen. And you're absolutely gobsmacked. You're knocked out. You're on your backside, wondering, almost in tears. I was in tears, first 3 times I watched it, because I went back to try and study what it was. But you've seen an action film with planes dropping bombs set during the Spanish Civil War, machine guns. Gary Cooper's great. He actually dresses in the outfit that I'm pretty certain Spielberg copied for Harrison Ford for Indiana Jones throughout the whole film, with the leather jacket and the hat and the bag. He's got this strange sort of relationship with Ingrid Bergman that doesn't quite fire and then does fire. And then, as I say, in the third act, you're absolutely knocked out. It's so emotionally moving. He sacrifices himself to let the rest of them go and charges the Franco's tanks on horseback. And of course, it's a desperate thing, but it's okay because the rest get away. And you're like, how did they do that? How did they do that? How did they take a genre that I thought I was familiar with, action and guns and fighting and all this macho stuff? How did they take that and turn it into a film that made me cry, that moved me, that was profoundly powerful, that won Oscars for its actors, that caused people to reevaluate and to think about their own lives, So I think the action genre is a really great one for touching people, for kidding them, just in the same way that you can take a comedy and you can make something profound.
I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is 13 Hours, because it is so moving from the beginning to the end, because you're so invested in the characters, and the action and the scenes in them are so over the top, but it takes you on that ride. And I think that you're right in saying is that if it was just action, you just wouldn't be invested. But the fact that you get that great storyline, again, that was a film at the end. I was in tears. I really, really was. But you've obviously wrote quite a few of the projects that you've directed. So do you feel as a director, it makes it easier for you to direct those films that you've wrote opposed to ones that you may not have?
It's a lot easier to rewrite them because I don't have to deal with a writer who has an ego or a producer who I then have to convince why we're doing this. Most of the experienced writers I've worked with don't care about that at all. Once they sign off and they get paid for it, they're happy to have you take their project, understanding that you're going to have to adapt it to locations, to cast, to how whatever the schedule can fit in and all that kind of stuff. So it makes, the only difference is that it makes it a little easier because I know the writer very well. I can slap him around because it's me. but otherwise, no. That you have to have a disconnect where at some point, the script is sacrosanct. It's very important, and oftentimes it's more important than other times. The dialogue, work really, really hard on it, or this word here preempts what's happening in the next act and that sort of thing. So, but the general feeling of it must be something that is relatively fluid, because the kind of films I make, which are indie films, which are at a much lower budget tier than certain films, studio pictures, I have to be able to shift and move because I don't know what's coming the following day. But it's raining, so now this scene that happened outside has to happen indoors. That's a very obvious reason, but quite often it's there's a multitude of tracking points that have changed. Things have happened in the earlier scene that it wasn't written or was slightly different, and you've got to just continuously track that throughout the script. And it can be an emotional point, it can be a plot point, or it could be simply a logistical point that needs to be matched. So for me, the script has to be relatively fluid, and if I've written it, it's obviously I'm very, very familiar with it. But I like to be as intimately familiar with the script, whoever wrote it. But yes, the only real benefit is that I'll just simply make the change right there and then and change it. Whereas there's a protocol you have to go through, especially if it's a big writer who's perhaps being paid more than a lot of other people. It was an expensive script to buy. he has a certain ego, then I have to sort of engage with him and say, look, it'd be really great if we could just move this a little bit because, the actor we got doesn't speak, Russian or whatever, whatever it might be. So from that context, it can be a bit easier. But honestly, there's a disconnect as we start going, and that script becomes just literally the basis for the blueprint that we're going to follow, and it'll move, it'll be changed, it'll be wrenched around, it'll have little bits and pieces done to it, all in the process, all in the interest of making a better film.
I mean, talking about egos just then, you've worked with many amazing actors. So without naming names, were there anyone that was more difficult to work with? And if so, how did you actually deal with them?
It's tricky. I mean, your job as a director is to get along with your cast as best as you possibly can. And if not get along with them, then be able to communicate them what you need or what the film needs in a way that gets them interested in doing what you'd like. It's tricky. A lot of the time they're combative for the sake of being combative, and you've got to lion-tame them. You've got to earn their respect, and you've got to sort of, and it can take a multitude of different purposes. It can be in the trailer for half an hour or an hour every morning, talking them back from the edge of the cliff, letting them know that it's going to be okay, listening to their concerns and qualms, and then they're calm. You get onto the set. Sometimes you don't have that option. The time is there, and it can be complicated. Since 2008, funnily enough, I haven't had many issues with cast. Watching how these great directors work with cast certainly taught me a thing or two, and the way that I go about it now has made that sort of problem one that I don't even worry about anymore. It's I get on with cast. I love them to pieces. They know that, and their performances reflect that sort of relationship. Earlier on in my career, it was a lot more confusing because I thought the producers were my boss. I thought that the schedule was my holy trinity. I had to follow it, and I couldn't understand why the actors weren't being. They didn't understand that they only had enough time for 2 takes. Why did they want to do a third one? We didn't have time. We knew that, and it was trying to explain logistical problems to them. And that's always a problem. If you're there on set saying, look, we only have time to do this, or the schedule's really bad, or we don't have the car that you wanted because there wasn't enough money. If you're giving those kind of excuses, you will have a hard time with the cast. It's the worst way to be. You have to think of another way of explaining what's going on, or getting what you want, or getting them behind what's going on. And you'll have a much better time of it. They're not, they're artists, and they are there with completely different agenda than the guy over there that's pushing the dolly. Now, to him, you say, look, we've got 10 minutes, get the thing built in 10 minutes, or it's not going to work, and you'll have wasted your time. And if you can't do it in 10 minutes, tell me how long it will be. You can talk to him that way, but you can't talk to an actor that way. There's a point in a director's career where he learns that, and the films reflect, and they start to look better, because the actor is a sensitive, delicate, interesting soul, and they need to be talked to in a specific way. They have to. And by the way, the biggest tough guys are the most sensitive and delicate of the bunch, and the most delicate sort of looking ingenue, beautiful little girl, she's going to be tougher than most of the tough guys. She'll know exactly what's needed, and she will require usually the least amount of sort of of delicate handling. It'll be the tough guy over there with the tattoos and the shaved head that always plays the lead. He's 99% of the time he's going to be the one that takes most of your attention as a director. And he's the one you're going to, he's going to be just sucking energy away from you as you let him know he's looking wonderful, everything's going good, it's going great. The camera angle's all for you. You're getting the same amount of close-ups as everyone else. You're getting more close-ups than anyone else, and you look wonderful. And the crew really, really loves working with you. They'll think you're fantastic. That's what he will need. It's a lot of the time your expectations are turned completely on their head.
I mean. Find your own piece of magic with Prop Store, the world's leading auctioneers of film props, costumes, and more. So check out propstore.com or follow the link in the description of this video. And while you're doing that, why don't you use our special code? Our special code will give you 10% off anything in the Buy Now section. And the code is easy to remember. It's Brian10. That's BRYAN 10, and it's just above the finger, just here. Use that at the checkout to get your 10% off. That's propstore.com. Which I would never have thought the big tough guy was the one that needed the most amount of attention. So
I've watched the big tough guys, 2 of them in a scene, and each one has 2 mirrors checking their bald spot and their hairline, looking at each other, while we had the girl off to the side with her arms crossed going. Each one of them's taking 20 minutes to make sure that we're not seeing the bald spot or the receding hairline or the toupee or whatever it might be. And it's, and these are the 2 guys that have the reputation in the game. And you're standing there as a director going, I could take a photo of this right now, and it would be one of the funniest things, but you could never do it because you would be, you'd never work again. And, well, certainly that never work with you again.
So the viewers right now are trying to guess on who those actors are. But I've got to say that now you call America your home. Do you miss the UK? Is there anything that you miss about the UK compared to where you are now?
I just got back. I did a week of post there in Wardour Street in Soho. I stayed on the Strand, and it was that beautiful English summer, and everyone is out in their summer clothes, and the food is lovely, and everyone's out chatting outside of the pubs there, and there's that wonderful sort of mist in the air, and I thought it was just the most wonderful thing. And then I had to pinch myself and remind myself I was staying on the Strand, and I was working on Wardour Street. I hadn't even got to get on a bus to get to where I was working, so I was walking there every morning. This is not a reality of living in England, but it's nice for a week. I do love England. I love the history and the culture. I shot Boudica there, my film that I did last year, which was my favourite. I shot One Ranger there, the one we should be talking about, which is my film for Lionsgate, which I'm very proud of. I shot Avengement and Accident Man there, and I like filming there. I'm there in the summer, and it's wonderful. The trees are green and flowers are out, and people are cheerful. I don't like the winters there very much. I get a bit old for me. I like the positivity of the American people. They're two nations divided by a language. It's there's a positivity to the Americans where the glass is half full, which I've always been drawn to. I need that to exist and to do what I want. I came from nothing. There was no nest egg. I was very lucky that I had an uncle in the business, but a single mother, all that kind of crap. Everyone has that. There's no excuse. But the point is, I found that I could get what I wanted. No one said, when are you going to get a proper job? You don't have a school education. You never finished high school. You can't direct a film. No one ever said that to me in America. They looked at this young man with a lot of optimism and a lot of ambition. They said, you know what, he might have something. Whereas in England, that same optimism and ambition got me a lot of shaking heads and what are you thinking? And it was soul destroying at that age. Nowadays, it wouldn't bother me at all. And I love England, but as a young man, that felt like someone chopping all of your sort of your strength away, doing leg kicks on you in a Thai boxing match. They were taking out your support. You were going to be hobbling for the next 3 or 4 days from that just those little comments. And although they were good because they force you to eventually believe in yourself, but it was 2 years of me taking normal jobs to discover that I never wanted a normal job. And the movies were for me. So I think it's different now. I think my daughter moved. She's an American. She grew up here and she moved back to England and she loves it there. And she says it's the most wonderful place in the world and people are fantastic. So maybe it's changed, but certainly in the late 80s, 90s, when I was there, England they had a slightly depressing attitude about the can-do. And it was driven by a jealousy, I think, as well. And perhaps it was where at the village, Maidenhead or whatever, Windsor. But I found an amazing optimism and encouragement in America, which I haven't found in any other country, in my years of traveling and filmmaking since then. There's a lot of beautiful things in many countries, but there's something special about America that they want you to succeed. They love the rebel. They love the person who's going to go do it their way. And they say, you know what, we like you. We like you because you've chosen to do it your way, and God damn it, you're out there giving it a shot. And they will look at you without any cynicism or irony, and actually mean it. Whereas in England there'll be some rolling eyes. I don't know. I just like that as a young man. I think it appealed to me. As I'm older now, I'm 50-ish, past 50 now, and it's like that's, I no longer need people's affirmations or pat on the back or encouragement, and maybe England is somewhere that I could live again, but certainly when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Do not come back to England, because literally I would love to live in America. America's like the best place ever. I've gone across the East Coast, Dallas. I've been to Dallas quite a few times. Love the place. I really, really do.
I do like Texas. I got to tell you, I really like Texas. They had me out for the Dallas Film Festival with One Ranger, and we opened it, and it was packed house, and I was really concerned because we've got Thomas Jane doing quite a heightened Texan accent for the film, circa 1880. Which we talked about, we liked, because the character had a lot of anachronisms to him. He was sort of old worldly, but I was really worried showing it there, and they loved it, and they were so supportive. The Q&A went on way longer than it should have done. They had to push the next film because we were chatting about this movie afterwards and talking about how we went about it, my experience working, because I worked on the Chuck Norris TV show there for years and years on and off, and it was really, really wonderful. I think I do like the Texans. I mean,
let's have a talk about this wonderful movie, which is One Ranger, which is one riot, one ranger, which I think is a great term, and obviously it's taken from the first ever Texas Ranger. So you wrote this film and directed. Where did the idea come from to write this story?
Well, I did that show. Walker, Texas Ranger, quite a lot, which I enjoyed working on. I didn't, it was not such a great show, for kids. But when they flew you in through Love Field Airport in Dallas, and there was a huge statue of a Texas Ranger there, Frank McDonald, and underneath it said "One Riot, One Ranger," and I said, "What is that?" And I read about it. He went to this boxing match. It was actually not a boxing match; it was a bare knuckle fight that had been amped up to the point of there being riots of people turning up to watch this bare knuckle fight. Gentleman Jim Corbett, I think it was, versus someone else, and they called in the Texas Rangers. The town principals, the mayor and the sheriff, had called on the Rangers because they didn't think they were going to be able to control this enormous riot that was predicted. And the train pulls in. There's dust going like the beginning of Once Upon a Time in the West, the Sergio Leone picture. And the train pulls out, and there's one guy standing there, and they're like, "Okay." He said, "I'm Bill McDonald. I'm the Texas Ranger." Well, where's everyone else? He said, "One riot, one ranger." That's all it needs. And I just thought that was brilliant. I thought that was fantastic. And it typified everything. As it turned out, there wasn't a riot in the end, and it was all okay. But the story, the anecdote has lasted, and it's something they're very proud of as an organization. But then as I did more research into Texas Rangers, they're extraordinarily up to date. They're sort of the equivalent of the English Special Air Service or Green Berets. They are an absolute elite outfit, which is extraordinarily difficult to get selected for and to get into. You have to be college educated. And then once you're in, you have to go through selection and training. And they're very, very good at what they do. They're world leaders in certain forms of, actually, interesting enough, computer tracking, cyber tracking, which is interesting when you think of them from the old days, tracking through the desert and looking for broken branches and footprints and things. Now it's cyber tracking, and they're they're the people that law enforcement go to when the job is, or the task at hand is too difficult for them. So I found that extraordinary, combined with the fact that they have this interesting uniform, which dates back to 1890s, turn of the 19th century fashion. The boots, the pants, the belt, the shirts, the hats, they have to be a certain make and style and color from a very short list that the Ranger actually buys himself, including the badge, which is based on a Mexican 5 peso piece that's been hammered and cut. Everything about it had an interesting mythology to it. And I think the American West itself is the mythology of America. It's the Greek stories. It's the Norse mythology of Scandinavia. It's Rob Roy and and little Bonnie Prince Charlie of the English. It's their mythology, and it's a lot more recent. But the country, as a nation, is a lot more recent too. So I loved that it was part of that. I wanted to take this character of American mythology and drop him smack dab in another culture and see how that worked. I found it interesting. It worked in the 60s with Coogan's Bluff, and the 70s with Brannigan, with John Wayne. It worked as I was a kid growing up with McLeod. So, and someone hadn't done this in a while, and I thought it'd be fun to do. And when I met Thomas Jane, he got it. He found it very amusing. He loves the idea of that anachronistic element of society that works, that is not only works, but it is better than the technology that we think is up to date. So it must be better than what we had in the past. You go to his house, and he made his house himself, by the way. It's all wonderful wood carpentry that he did. But there's pictures, lots of paintings from the 1800s, 1900s. He's a fan of the same sort of era of Western movies as I am, like Boudicca and Hawks and Raoul Walsh and Ford and that kind of stuff. So we got on very well talking about this, taking this person who spoke almost like he stepped from another time and putting him into another scenario. Now, the scenario changed. It was, at one point it was San Francisco, another point it was Thailand, another point it was South America. And finally, we sort of settled on England because I thought that would be logistically the easiest for me to sort of replicate. And then it also lended itself to a lot of sort of funny encounters we thought interesting. It's the same language as well, which was saved for subtitles and sort of an accented actor talking through the whole thing. And we got very lucky. I think it was Dominique.
How difficult was it to shoot in the UK? Because this film literally is full of action. So I can only imagine with all the gunfights and everything like that. How difficult was it? Did you get anyone complaining?
Well, I shot in London before a couple of times. It's tricky there, not tricky like it is in America. In America, in Los Angeles, you put a camera out, you'll have a cop there saying, "Where's your permit?" To get a permit, you have to have insurance, you have to have liability, which is fine, but you also have to run it by the police, which means 3 officers there being paid $7.50 an hour, and basically it comes down to how much you can afford to pay. And so I've been used to that for a long time in LA. It's not the same in England. They pride themselves on just being difficult. It's not about getting money, which is my experience with English in many ways. But I knew I didn't want to shoot in London, so we took this to a town called Ipswich, which is 1 hour as the crow flies, but about 80 years as technology goes away from London. And we shot in Ipswich, and it was the marina there amazingly lent itself to the Thames embankment and sort of that part of London quite well. I quite enjoyed it. I liked it, but I was really concerned about the gunfire. I know that England is very different when it comes to firearms in the US, although LA is very difficult when it comes to firearms or movies. And we had a scene with a belt-fed machine gun that Jess Liaudin shoots, and it's right in the middle of Ipswich. And so I told the crew, we're probably going to get one take at this, so we'll put multiple cameras on it because I'm almost certain we're going to get closed down after we fire this one. We fired it was so noisy, dust came off the ceilings, and the shell cases going everywhere, and sparks. There was nothing, and no one complained. No one complained for the whole movie. We shot machine guns in the street, in buildings, running around. Always very safe. We had police and everything, and obviously told the the authorities before anything would happen, and did everything as it should be. But they were so supportive, so behind us, and really brilliant, And so this is Ipswich. It was a great place to make a movie. I had no problem at all. And the town is lovely. It's got a lot of interesting history. There's some elements to it that are rough, but I've travelled around the world. I've seen a lot rougher than that, and but I liked it. The problem was we only had a short amount of time, so everything had to be sort of really, really carefully planned ahead of time and rehearsed. And you get in there, and just keeping people very, very safe. Obviously, in a fight scene, things can go wrong quickly with blank guns and squib hits. Things can go wrong. A person puts their hand on one by accident, will take your finger off. A squib can blind, blank can blind you or hurt you quite badly if you come up too close to it. So everything has to be planned very, very, very carefully. In 30 plus years, I haven't had any kind of accident worth talking about with pyrotechnics or blanks. So it's something that I pride myself on. But it was tough because, it was just a short shoot. But the guys were great. The performers, the stuntmen were fantastic. That we had Dan Stiles was the stunt coordinator who's from London, who did Avengement and Accident Man and Boudica with me. And he's phenomenal. He brings a really good team together who rehearse ahead of time. They shoot everything with freebies, with video. So I get to look at that and comment on it. So by the time we get to the set, it's really organized, you know. I might push him a little harder or ask for this. I'll talk to Dan and say, can we go a little bigger here? He'll either say yes or no, and you jam from there. But I thought the fight scenes, for me, the 3 fight scenes between Ranger Tyree and Oleg, played by Jess Liaudin, were key to the picture. They should, I didn't want him to be a martial artist, Thomas. I wanted him to be a trained police officer. But what he has that is rare is that intestinal fortitude, where you knock them down and they just get back up again. And I've seen that in stunts. I've seen that with military, where a person who, for no physical reason, should be standing up again, but somehow something indescribable, something that one human has that another human doesn't have, allows that man or woman to get back up to their feet again. And this is something I find really interesting. I tried to put that in Thomas's character. You know?
I mean, I love Thomas's character, because there is a scene where he's getting out of bed and he makes lots of noises, a bit like what I make when I get out of bed. But so the fact that he has this fight with this giant of a man, you know, but yet he gets knocked down, but he keeps on getting back up. It's so raw. It's so sort of, you can feel the grit, the true grit of this character getting up. It's just fantastic.
One of my favorite scenes in this, all there's a script, it's a movie. I don't know how I pulled it off. It's not old enough yet for me to say I have any favorite scenes in it. But one of my favorite scenes in the script was when he's knocked out. Jess comes knocking on the door after he's, all these guys have been shot and he's knocked out Dominique's character, and he sits on the bed, and the two of them just have this brief discussion, which basically alludes to the fact that he can't stop doing what he's doing. And TJ's saying, why do you keep coming? It's not going to work out well for you. And Jess says, I can't, I don't have any choice. My guy treats me very well, and this is my job, and this is what we've got to do. And this is something I liked, and this is something else I'd run into in the real world, which is when you have two professionals go at it and they know it's going to be unpleasant, this very rarely do they dislike each other. Very rarely do they get passionate about calling each other names or anything like that. It comes down to the fact that this is the job that's got to be done, and it's going to happen this way. I've seen bouncers on the door turn away professional criminals who would kill people for being talked to that way, but because it's another bouncer, they know there's a mutual respect there, and there's something that's interesting. And you don't see it handled much in movies anymore, because most of the guys that are making these movies have never really lived in the real world. They've lived in the world created by films and comic books, So I tried to put that stuff in. I don't know if it worked or not. Who knows? In the grand scheme of things, I've learned not to write off a film for sort of 3 or 4, 5 years, and then quite often the ones that you don't expect to survive start getting this cult following, and the ones that you kind of love to just vanish into the ether because they never quite found their audience. We don't know, do we?
I mean, I've got to ask as well, there is a scene in the movie that I am positive that I've recognised the location. It's when Declan meets Yuri. Is that the decommissioned US base in Woodbridge?
It absolutely is. We shot a lot of the film there as well. A lot of interiors were shot there.
Because it's awesome, because I stayed there for 5 nights.
Did you see any UFOs?
No. Why? Why is it known for UFOs?
That's supposed to be the spot for UFOs in the United Kingdom. It's a very, very well known. Very well known. I didn't know that. I was there to film a TV program called Dog Borstal that was on UK TV years ago, and it was an awesome base. It really, really is, with the Typhoon hangars and everything like that. So I recognised it. So there is news. I have heard that you've said that you might be working on a sequel to this movie. They really want one. They've talked to me about it. Lionsgate have, and I had thought about it, and I like it. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. I have my plate pretty full at the moment, and it would be fantastic to work with Thomas Jane again, and I love this character like crazy. I was part of my life for quite a few years, getting the film financed and getting it done. I don't know if I did him justice with this one. It was tough to do for the money, and I hope I have, and I love the movie to pieces. But we'll see how I feel about it as time goes by. Right now, I'm booked up for about 3 or 4 movies out, so it's a case of you've got to really want to make the movie, whatever it is I do. And I don't like repeating myself, and you just got to really want to do it. It's got to mean more to you than anything in the world. So if I find myself unable to think of anything else and wanting to come back to it, I will for sure.
I mean, I definitely would love to see a sequel. I think his story is not finished. I think that he's got a lot more to tell, and I'd love to see Thomas Jane, who is just an amazing actor, back on screen, and Dominique Tipper as well. For all the Expanse fans out there, it's great to see them both on screen together.
She's so good, man. It was like a joke by the end of it, because every single scene she did, she had so many props, so much exposition to do. I mean, just nightmares for an actor. You're an actor, so you understand, but it's like you've got to take a gun apart, do this, pick this up, put that envelope over there, and then also be doing exposition at the same time. By the 3rd or 4th time we had a scenario like that, I said, "I'm so sorry, Dominique. I didn't realize it was going to work out this way." But she's phenomenal, and in the physical stuff, she's really good at. So coordinated. She's an ex-dancer, and so all that kind of stuff is sort of second nature to her. A lot of dancers go into make very good fight guys. They're able to do that, and girls they're able to sort of take that same mind for dance choreography and apply it to the physical martial arts, but really good and good ideas too. Now, I enjoyed working with her, and it's Thomas is quite intimidating when he's in character. And by the way, he was in character 24 hours a day on this one. He spoke in that accent, between takes at the end of the day. To play opposite someone like that and keep it lightweight and cool and thinking about the job, and not to second guess yourself or get a panic attack is quite an achievement. She really did well,
And you know what? Everyone's got to watch this movie. It's just awesome. One Ranger. I just think it's fantastic. And then before we bid farewell, you've got a couple of projects coming out later in the year, have you, or beginning? I think the first one. There's a lovely image there. If you want to just tell us quickly about that movie.
I have this project has been my lifeblood for almost 20 years. My daughter's middle name is Boudica. I've been obsessed with this story. I felt it hadn't been told properly. People had messed it up. I watched everything that was available on it, and I was upset by how badly they'd been done. And if anything, that was the motivation to try and do it and tell the story the way I felt it could be told. It took an enormous time to get it financed and find a company that wanted to make it with me. It was a really difficult shoot. I was so lucky to have Olga. She is phenomenal in it. It's an incredible part for her. I don't know if you know anything about Boudica. Boudica, 2,000 years ago, she was a Celtic queen who was able to unite England for the first time, which prior to that point was a group of disparate tribes, Celtic tribes, who were either friendly or not friendly or indifferent to the Roman colonists who were there at the time. And she managed to unite them all, and for this wonderful, short, brief period of time, caused absolute royal havoc to the Romans, killed tens of thousands of them, burnt cities, burnt them to the point where archaeologists today will tell you that when they're examining London or Colchester or any of the towns that she stormed, there's a change in the color of the soil. It goes from dark brown, red to pitch black, where everything was burnt,
Wow.
superheated, but the brick and the tiles turned to glass. And that was AD 43. That was when Boudica was on her warpath. This woman was insanely powerful and the most charismatic and most interesting of people. During Victorian times, Queen Victoria, sort of publicity people, her PR department realized that they could use the legend of Boudica as a way to instill faith in a female leader. And so we have the Boudica legend became reinvigorated during the Victorian era, and we have this wonderful statue of her with her 2 daughters below Big Ben next to the Houses of Parliament. She's the basis for Rule Britannia. She's the woman with the Trojan helmet and the shield on our plaque. She's a it's something so incredibly English, so incredibly part of our our consciousness as a fighting, feisty nation of people that won't be pushed around. That I found it very interesting. I wanted to do it. I wanted to make this film, as I said. And meeting Olga Kurylenko on White Elephant, I realized this was someone that I could talk to that would understand what this was about and could do it. They didn't speak English the way we speak it now anyway. They wouldn't have spoken even in English that we understood now. So the accent and where she came from doesn't matter. So I want to nip that one in the bud straight off the bat. But I knew that she could do it. And we put her with Peter Franzen, Clive Standen, Lucy Martin from Vikings, who are also friends of mine, who are just really, really good actors. And then Nick Moran, who was the lead in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, comes back for me and does just a phenomenal role as Decus Catianus, who was the bane of Boudica's existence and gets served appropriately.
And when does this get released?
Netflix UK are doing it in the UK. I don't know if we'll get a theatrical there because Netflix UK picked it up, but we have a theatrical release in the US at the end of the year, and you'll hear a lot more about it. I'm sort of purposely trying to keep the wraps on at the moment, because if you talk about these things too soon, it can dissipate and people feel that it's old news by the time you actually try and promote it. But I'm so proud of the picture and so incredibly amazed at what Olga did. And as I say, the transformation, if anyone knows the story, we've handled it. We went through about 50 gallons of blood in this movie. It's more than I've gone through in any film that I've ever made. And I will tell you with my hand on my heart, what we did and what we've represented on screen was a fraction of what the Romans did to the British in reality, and the indignities that they served. When I did my research, we've literally just touched the surface on it, and it's still enough to warrant the venom that she had for them. And then I have a film called Chief of Station with Aaron Eckhart coming out in the new year, which is a throwback to the spy thrillers of the sort of Cold War era. It's set nowadays, but it's very much a spy movie with KGB and CIA, and it's the biggest budget I've had so far. And phenomenal cast. Again, Olga I brought back for that, and Aaron Eckhart's in that, and Alex Pettifer, who are all just really, really good. And it's a little calmer and cooler and more collected. We've got some great action in the third act, which hopefully will please people. A very, very cool car chase, which I haven't done before. But it's a character-driven spy film, and something that I loved when I was the spy who came in from the cold and the early Bond pictures and Ipcrest File and those kind of things. I adored those when I was growing up and an impressionable young man. So those are good. But in the meantime, please check out One Ranger. And if you can, I would like to say, please see it on DVD or Blu-ray, because there's an incredible behind the scenes that was put together by Lionsgate, which you won't see anywhere else, which is really worth the price of admission. It's so cheap to buy DVDs now, and you have the opportunity to see the behind the scenes. I think, it not being a Luddite or desperately in need of touching the past, but I think it's a really good way, if you're a film fan, of knowing what went into making the film that you're watching. In the old days, you'd go to the Blockbuster and you could choose an indie film or an A film. You had that choice. Nowadays, you don't. You just get streamed. You see one little image and 2 lines of description. You don't know if you're seeing a studio picture or you're seeing a film that cost 120 grand. It's the most difficult period ever to release an indie film and get a proper audience for it.
And there's something special about actually having a physical copy of a film.
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
It's like books. I can never have a Kindle. I'd like a hardback cover and.
Well, as I say, a great film you go back to year after year. When we were kids, you say Great Escape with Granddad at Christmas. How are you going to do that if it's not streaming on the service that you have, or they've temporarily dropped it? What are you going to do? You go to your DVD rack and you put it on. You watch it in widescreen as it should have been presented always, and you watch it in its full glory, and you have a chance to revisit these. And it's an art form. It's not a way of killing time. It's not sports. It's an art form. It's an art that people have put their heart and soul into. You should give it that respect when you watch the movie, in my opinion. Anyway, maybe we're just going towards an era when it's throwaway, it's tucked away.
Well, I used to work at Blockbusters, so I appreciate the fact of making a night of it, going, choosing the film, getting it, taking it home. But now we're sort of flooded. We're drowning in content, and I think that we're losing certain gems amongst all the content that we should see. And
I think worse, the audiences as they get younger don't realise that there's a better way to watch movies, and they think that the norm is to watch it on your phone or some streaming service where it's poor, you know, that you got the blacks all crap and there's terrible commercials coming. They don't understand that's not the way you watch a movie. You sit down, you enjoy a movie, and you invest as much into it in many cases as the people that made it. You know, it takes that. You know, it's a shorter period. It's only 90 minutes, but it should move you and take you to another place for that. You know,
definitely.
The other thing I'd like to say on this one is I've been watching all the latest action movies, and I see 50% to 60% visual effects used in every single one of the action sequences, and with a cumulative over the film of about 80 to 90% touched by visual effects in all of the key areas of danger, for jeopardy or action. If you want to see a picture made the old school way with blanks that come out of a shell case and make a bang and are dangerous, with special effects that are dangerous, and fire that's real, and stunts where the actors are getting bruised and beaten and bloodied, and they've gone and they've given you their heart and soul, go take a look at One Ranger, because I don't see an awful lot going on out there that is like it. I see a lot of cartoon movies that are basically like watching Tom and Jerry for 90 minutes, which is fine. It has, as I say, it has its place in entertainment, but we're doing something a little different, and it would be great for people to know that.
And it's definitely an awesome movie. Go and check it out. Jesse, you've been a great guest. It's such an honor to have you on. It really is. Keep safe and stay super, my friend.
Thank you very much. Likewise, really, really honored to be here, and thank you for having me.